Who are we?
What I really like about Men in Black 3 is we are reinventing the franchise.
Action!
And the real absolute necessity is to elevate it story-wise.
You have laughs, and then tension builds up. And then you get to laugh again.
Josh, he couldn't do an impersonation of Tom. He had to do an interpretation of the character that Tommy plays.
All right.
Will and I were both very mischievous, so we're having fun with this kind of back and forth.
Action!
And Barry has a remarkable inner meter in terms of what he wants a moment to be about.
Right.
Wow, that's Men in Black.
Agent J and Agent K. Just felt great to see them back, just the same guys that we always knew.
Woo! Yeah! MIB, baby.
With Men in Black 3, it was a great homecoming. It's like that childhood fantasy
Jetpacks.
where you know stuff that other people don't know. And there's a clever inventiveness to the creatures, a wonderful sense of humor.
Yeah, perfect.
But this one was harder than all of the rest of them.
Access restricted.
There was a lot of elements in it that made it difficult.
One of the challenges for something like Men in Black is that you need to come up with a story that gives the audience what they expect from the franchise.
Just one last thing. An eye exam.
But then you also have to give them something more than that.
The major necessity is deeper, that you've got to go deeper with the elements of story and character and revelation that you're delivering.
Hey, is it worth it? Oh yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough.
Although the Men in Black movies feel like they have big themes in terms of the world and the universe, it's really ultimately about characters and the relationship between people.
How did you get to be like you?
Men in Black 3 is all about the two main characters discovering the secrets about their relationship.
There are things out there you don't need to know.
That's not the lie you told me when you recruited me.
First of all, I'm the biggest fan of Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, and they're just like the most amazing, powerful duo together.
You can just kind of kick back and marvel at Tommy's cadence.
He's going to demonstrate an electro-biomechanical neurotransmitting zero synapse reposition.
And Tommy is a force of nature, truly a maelstrom.
Hey, what's up?
You're extremely hot!
And Will is sort of a jack of all trades, from writing to acting to everything you need. We had a scene outside the factory where it called for Agent J to jump out a window, and stunts came in days earlier and built cranes and scaffolding. And I looked at the rehearsal, and I just assumed that meant Will would do it.
Here we go, everybody. Go.
So I said, all right, Will, you're up. And no other actor would I even think that actor is going to do it. But with Will, you don't even think twice.
Man, I'm getting too old for this. I can only imagine how you feel.
So we knew we needed to bring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones back together again. But we wanted to do something new and inventive. And what we've done is created not only a Men in Black movie, but also a time travel movie.
Kay!
There's nothing simple about time travel. It's almost like our brains can't really figure it out because there's always going to be a question you can't answer.
Break the laser line?
No, don't break it.
I mean when I'm fast enough.
Sounds good.
But it does give you great opportunities.
To see Will Smith go back to the 60s and see how he interacts with a time when, you know, America's really changing was really interesting.
Hey, what kind of work do you do? Starting forward for the Detroit Darkies.
Also, it seemed like this was time to see how Agent J and Agent K first met.
Kay?
How do you know my name?
Josh Brolin comes in as the young Tommy Lee. He just is a wonderful image of the young K.
Agent K, how are you?
I'm good. Okay, group hug on the way to doing what we're doing.
I'm a fan of the franchise, so it really is kind of a dream come true in being asked to do something like this. But then you have to actually deal with doing it. And then all the fear and anxiety comes in. Because how are you going to break up, you know, one of the great iconic duos in movie history?
And action.
I said, well, I don't want to do a caricature because I find that that takes the humanity out of the person. So it became less about how am I going to do Tommy in finding a rendition of Tommy and then making it our own.
We need pie.
What?
My granddaddy always said, if you got a problem that you can't solve, helps to get out of your head. Pie, it's good.
Maybe K is the lighter one, and maybe J has gotten used to being with Tommy in the future, and when he goes back in the past, he's kind of taken on some of those curmudgeon-y attributes.
What are you doing in your spare time, Strat?
So maybe it's a flip.
What's amazing is I keep thinking I'm directing one actor. The performance has been so consistent that it's really hard for me to tell where Tommy Lee Jones ends and Josh Brolin begins.
You lose something over here, Hondo?
And what was interesting about bouncing back and forth with Tommy and Josh, it was almost the identical chemistry.
Oh, I have a line?
And for Josh to be able to step into that and not just deliver Tommy, but deliver chemistry, that's unheard of. We got some real actors in this thing. You throw that level of talent into this type of movie, it creates a fantastic magic.
I'm gonna go to the little men's in black room, then we'll go find those morons from Pax and Thera. Lunch is on me.
One of the goals or the tricks of working on a Men in Black story is to try to put it inside of a kind of a cop narrative that you feel comfortable with.
Boris the Animal. Put him away a long time ago. It's the worst mistake I ever made.
So, Men in Black 3 is the story of a long-last villain going after your partner.
I feel younger already.
Our villain on this movie is named Boris the Animal.
It's just Boris.
He's played by Jermaine Clement, who's a incredibly great New Zealand actor and songwriter.
Rather hot in here, isn't it? Mind if I open a window?
He has to sort of perform as if he's learned the English language as a second language, yet still be understandable, and we've decided he learned it through sort of British diction tapes.
You can't win, Boris. There's too many of us.
Let's agree to disagree.
They described him as a kind of erudite psychopath. So who wouldn't want to be one of those? Also, the great thing about Boris is that I'm like my own henchman.
That's not possible.
It's hard enough remembering one set of lines, but then I had to do one Boris set of lines and do the other one and react to them. So that was tricky.
What's your plan? Prevent the ArcNet from being deployed. Kill anyone who tries. Good plan. Didn't work.
He's so dry. He's so deadpan. And yet there's something about Jermaine which is very physically imposing. He's kind of a big, strong guy, and this combination of almost comic detachment,
The big one.
and a real sense of power. And Jermaine is unique in that way, that he can deliver the comedy, but also in a legitimate way, fulfill what a villain has to do.
Sorry, darling. We did love the cake.
His name's Griffin the Arcanan. He's a fifth-dimensional being, last of its species.
Let's go, Matt! Oh!
When I sat down to write Griffin, to me he represented a really important theme in the movie, which is fate, and whether or not you can escape it.
Negative possibilities are multiplying as we speak. 20 seconds. All right, wait.
He was really written as a hybrid between string theory, physics, and kind of a Zen master.
The bitterest truth is better than the sweetest lies. Griffin is unique in one sense, is that he is purebred alien coming as he is.
Damn.
And Barry was very specific in terms of how to play him. We found an interesting balance of someone who is curious and anxious about the situation that he finds himself in. This is gonna be interesting.
Michael brought to Griffin an incredible sense of positivity, and it lends to a character who's about fate a great sense of optimism.
This is my new favorite moment in human history.
The new Men in Black is run by a woman, Emma Thompson. She's both strong and sardonic, like Zed was, but really funny.
When I told the Phoenician Zyklot about Zed's passing, she said something that I'm going to repeat. Technically, it's very demanding because it's often an awful lot of chat or very quick physical stuff. That has to walk a very fine line between being absolutely serious but also funny. He imprisoned Boris. He did not put up the arc light because apparently that's in Iron Man and it's not cleared. The training was all in comedy, so I'm very lucky. But you've got to be funny and you've got to hold your end up. You've got to know your stuff.
Having cast Emma, she brings with her the quality which is essential to be in Men in Black, which is you play comedy straight.
It's always my theory, surround your absurd situation
Catastrophic Earth attack imminent.
with the realest acting you can have, and you'll have great comedy.
It's a very wise man.
With Barry, you're carving out moments, and we improvise a lot. There's a lot of ad-libbing and all that.
Ship sailed, Hoss.
Or Amigo, or Hondo.
I'll just use my imagination.
And Barry's been so open in terms of listening to what kernels of wisdom we have found in the playing of it. So the script has become a kind of jumping off point in terms of what the possibilities are.
Come on, everybody, let's do one more rehearsal.
We'd rehearse at night before we shot the next day. And therefore we were allowed to find the scene and find the truth in the scenes. This is really rare on studio films.
They're very, very big movies, these, but what's interesting to me is it doesn't feel like a big movie on set. It feels like the kinds of movies I make, and I think that's admirable and remarkable.
Cut, great. Let's move on.
Men in Black 1 and 2 were both, all the stage work was done in LA, and they came to New York just for locations. This movie has decided to shoot the whole thing here.
My theory is, if there are aliens on Earth, where would they hang out and be able to pass? New York.
There's a sequence that takes place in Coney Island. And because Coney Island's this crazy place, you know, there's like just weird-looking people. But if you look in the background, you'll see these aliens that we've made. You have to look for it, you know?
In addition, New York crews are really fantastic. They have great senses of humor.
All right, this is the rehearsal. Can we clear everyone out of there, please?
So there's an energy when you're in New York that sort of invades your whole thinking process, which is why shooting in New York is so great. Cut.
Every day when I come in on set, I'm just blown away. And how they create the magic behind everything and the detail that they put in. It's amazing.
Bill, which is better, the fast pushing like that or the
I think Barry's smart in that he surrounds himself with a lot of good people. So many people in this film are really talented and at the top of their craft.
We have Ken Ralston, who's won 6 Academy Awards, and he's been on the set the whole time.
He is towards the end of the shot, it just goes dead center.
He has an associate, Jay Red, and the great thing about working with Ken and Jay is it's all about reality.
I think we have to pull a yellow out of this thing for some of these shots.
Can we play, are there any darks we can play at that?
When we first got involved in it, he wanted it to feel more gritty, more realistic, as things were really a part of the world that Men in Black is, and just integrated into these environments really so you believe they were standing in them. The Lunar Prison, you have to feel like this place really exists. We've created a computer version of all the cells which looks just like it, so we can do some really large, huge shots of this place. And all of this stuff is based on Beau's design.
This is the Neuralizer, 1969. I've done 4 movies now with Beau. He thinks like a director, he designs like a director.
What really was exciting about Men in Black 3 is the underlying concept, which combines irony and props, their vehicles.
There are some very interesting new devices we use in Men in Black 3. We have new guns.
No. Space gun. That's what I'm talking about.
Also, new neuralizers. Josh Brolin and Will Smith have to chase our villain on motorcycles.
And they really did make practical versions of these. They made some that were just big hoops. They made some that kind of drove on a sort of ATV vehicle.
We've made some really interesting Men in Black cleanup devices.
Step away from the orb. The real deal, time jump gear.
And there's a great alien device that allows people to jump time.
So the production design on Men in Black 3 is really astonishing. And Men in Black headquarters is actually to scale. I mean, it's life size.
It's a large set. A lot of the stuff also was manufactured, fabricated in Los Angeles and trucked out in pieces and assembled here. And it was a real race to have it all be put together nicely.
It was built in a warehouse that was used to train and keep horses in the army in the 1880s in Brooklyn. So it's a huge set, and there were scores of aliens walking around in it.
I've got Rick Baker designing all the aliens, who's won 7 Academy Awards.
I've made more aliens for this film than both Men in Blacks combined, times 10, I think, Since Men in Black 3, there's this whole time travel element. I thought it would be cool if we did things that look like different aliens from old 60s movies and 50s movies and stuff. And to be able to do my version of those kind of classic science fiction aliens was a lot of fun. Yeah, cool. It's Fishman.
You could say that if you've seen one alien, you've seen them all, but that's really not true. Rick is so creative. Every alien's a fascinating thing. You can't take your eyes off of it.
So the world that we're creating for Men in Black 3 is incredibly visual, and all of us as a team have a singular, unified viewpoint.
And it's very distinctly Barry Sonnenfeld. It's sort of the shape of the world
Good.
From Barry's head.
Well, Barry's incredibly eccentric and incredibly fun.
Walter.
Guy is, from another world.
Barry's mind is twisted in how he just comes up with and creates these scenes and scenarios.
The fish is going to eat you, and it's coming up your legs. You grab, and we'll rehearse all this.
There's a scene that takes place in a Chinese restaurant that has Boris in it, but also some aliens in the restaurant themselves.
And Bob here is a clear violation of Health Ordinance 32.
And Barry found this picture on the internet of this snot-colored lump of fish, you know, with this really kind of sad face and a big nose. It's like something that's too stupid to design. You wouldn't design something that looked like that. Hey! And it really exists. So we made this thing that looks exactly like this crazy big lumpfish.
Action. We just did a scene today where Will was on the motorcycle, and I looked over at Barry because I was off camera, and I looked at Barry, and Barry was so into it. It was like he was having a seizure or something. He definitely has a style in what he professionally does, but it's the energy that he brings to the set that makes this franchise what it is. You couldn't have the franchise without Barry.
Gotta aim the nozzles in. Yeah, that's great.
Sphere is picking out by the engine. You're in the control center monitoring to go above and below.
Man module getting ready for launch. Here's Jack King and launch control.
We knew we needed a great ending to this movie, one that felt like it was fitting for the latest part of this franchise. And I struggled with that for a bit.
It's just one small step.
But in 2009, it was the 40th anniversary of the Apollo launch. And I was looking at the newspaper and all of a sudden realized, of course, that's where this thing has to end.
It gave us a focus for where this movie had to head. But it certainly also gave us a big production headache. It's a challenging thing to try to pull off contemporary action in a historical context like that.
Just past the 2-minute mark in the countdown.
It's a very recognizable event, and there was a huge amount of detail and a huge amount of work that went into building all of this stuff.
On set, they had built a 2-section tall version of the gantry, as well as one of the gantry arms, and the topmost part of the Apollo capsule.
The rest of the gantry, the rocket, all of that stuff is all created digitally. All the steam and smoke and everything is all digital.
We actually had to treat the steam and smoke really as another character. As pretentious as it sounds, there's performance to some of the clouds.
Again, let's watch our element of K sitting here. We don't want to cover him up that much.
That's pretty good.
And our responsibility in character animation was doing a lot of the more extreme Boris configurations. There was stuff where he's shooting quills at Agent J and K.
Every day I turn up, they're strapping me to something and flinging me around. Even with a harness, just looking over, just say a 20 or 30 foot precipice, that's sort of enough to make me nervous.
There were a lot of shots that were just too impractical or too dangerous to shoot, not only with the real actors, but even with stuntmen. And so we did different shots of completely digital doubles, which was a really great challenge because this stuff has to intercut with the real actors.
And you've got these big sweeping camera moves as well. So it gives a big kind of epic quality to the whole launch tower, which is really gigantic, but it made that whole scene much more complex.
It's a difficult balancing act because there's so many elements that could go wrong in any individual shot. But Barry's done a really good job of working from the spine. And the spine is the relationship between J and K.
See why I recruited you. You good man.
By the end of it, something has snuck up on you. And you realize that this has been a journey that wasn't just one of comedy or science fiction or visceral action, but that there was a legitimate emotional journey here.
Hey, my name's Kay. What's your name?
James.
James? That's a nice name.
And one of the things that Agent J comes to learn in saving his partner is that he does so at the price of his father's life, which we really felt makes him a true hero. But it's a tough moment. It really makes you understand the love between these two characters and that the true origin story is a young Agent K becoming a surrogate father for Agent J.
James.
I think it's emotionally true.
When you can come up with a story and a set of characters that have the right to live on beyond 1 or 2 or 3 movies, I think it's a meaningful accomplishment. And I think this is a really kind of a lovely myth.
It's clever, and it's fun, it's poignant, it's interesting, and it's a sense of a new birth.
Between Barry, Will, and one of the most amazing crews I've ever worked with, I've had a blast on this movie. A blast.
If we succeed in what we're trying to do, the audiences will be amused and amazed and also moved.
Wow. Anytime you go to work with Will Smith, it's going to be a happy day. Will and Barry together make it an even happier day.
Cut. Very good.
Hey, don't even worry about it.
Okay, what's the plan?
You're gonna send me back to July 15th, 1969.
No, that's why you get to wear the black suit.
We have the chance to time jump. So what does Men in Black look like in 2012? What did it look like in 1969?
From a story point of view, it's a very gnarly set of problems you have to solve.
It's a period movie sandwiched in the Men in Black envelope.
Yeah, 1969 is very, very different for Agent J.
It wasn't the best time for your people. I'm just saying.
Who was that?
Double A?
Your partner.
This particular Men in Black is so much fun because we can represent 2012, which is an updating of the past 2 movies and giving them new weapons, new devices, new everything. But we also get to go back and treat the 69 portion of the movie in this great retro way.
It's like we have ourselves a standoff.
2/3 of our movie takes place back in '69. And one of the things that's fun is sort of the steampunk retro era of what futuristic stuff would have looked like.
1969 gives you a huge, deep, vast mine of inspiration to generate the props, the sets, the weapons, the vehicles.
Bo just creates a beautiful world that looks real. It reminds you of the real world, but it's not. It's more fascinating.
I think people are gonna be completely surprised and shocked by the recreation of that era.
Man, I am getting too old for this. I can only imagine how you feel.
It's been 10 years, and we thought, let's have some fun and let's design 2 different Men in Black headquarters, and let's decide that there was a changing aesthetic. So the 2012 headquarters is sort of a more stark, white, gray, and black environment.
In bringing the Men in Black headquarters deeper into the 21st century, I wanted to have a clean, modern look because all of the aliens and the agents look better in a well-lit, clean and crisp environment. But moreover, there's also a slight modern, futuristic, sterile quality that we don't have in the rest of the world that I find refreshing.
We made a conscious effort not to see any paper, for instance. The files are passed by, media cards and flash drives and whatever. So very austere, very beautiful.
We use the computer to manipulate shapes that result in, pieces like this.
It's not built out of wood, it's built out of fiberglass, and there's not a straight wall in Men in Black headquarters. It's just all curves and obscure shapes.
Now we're looking at the Men in Black headquarters 1969. It took 3 months to remodel that. We started with basically the same architectural shell, and then we changed basically every square inch of the surface. But we incorporated a lot of the same basic elements so that you would feel that you're still in the Men in Black headquarters. Also, I took the license of tweaking the black towards a little bit of brown, and they have one other color introduced, which is orange, because orange to me just screams 1969. One of the key differences is the technology.
We went the opposite direction where we had carbon paper and the computers were spitting out computer punch cards, and we just tried to play on the fact that it was really older technology, even though it was state-of-the-art at the time.
Bo Welch ripped this thing. You know, I walked into that 1969 headquarters, and it's just magic.
Where'd you get the car? And the suit.
I stole them both. A car from your wife, suit from your grandmother.
We always felt that Men in Black is sort of above and beyond style. It's why their suits always look the same. Once you've seen an alien, you're gonna tell me that wide ties are in style and skinny ties are out? Please. I know the world is bigger than that.
You know what the difference is between you and me? I make this look good.
You can't beat the black suit. It is such powerful, iconic imagery. You know, and you throw the black suit on, and it's like you just melt into the mental space of a man in black. It's just cool.
That Stern likes that suit of yours,
What, it's a crime to wear a black suit?
Barry wanted to see some kind of a difference when Will went back to 1969, that he and Josh would look slightly different. With Will, we wanted to do something a little looser, a little sexier than he has had before, just to help to show the contrast. Josh is a little boxier, but he's not boxy to the point where he doesn't look good, but it's still a very square shoulder and a little more buttoned down, which is more 60s than we ever did before.
When I put on the suit, it's the most surreal feeling in the world. It's like a kid putting on a Superman suit.
So you're going to be late for your meeting with the Viagrans. They have a revolutionary new pill.
It's decided that the girls would be much sexier and more eye candy in the 60s than they were in 2012. But we were still going to go with a uniform. So I did a very simple, classic black dress that looked good on all the girls. So there's definitely a difference between the men and the women in 1969, where in 2012, they are more visually similar.
I won those at Coney Island on the ring toss.
I won a stuffed bear once, but never one of these.
For 2012, as our technology always does, it got smaller and cleaner. For 1969, it got large and clunky.
What's interesting is some of the devices in 69 seem to be even more futuristic than what we have in 212.
If you stay too far ahead of your time, then you haven't capitalized on the joy and fun of time travel. So the decision was they're slightly ahead.
Don't put that up to your head.
My favorite thing being is the size of cell phones back then.
Have a look at this for me, please. Would you stop that? What? That thing is gonna give her brain cancer or something.
We all remember the iconic neuralizer from the last two movies, which was a small handheld device that popped up and made a flash. It's very sleek and diminutive.
That's a big-ass neuralizer.
Back in 1969, the neuralizer was about the size of a cement mixer.
Basically, it's the same shape, but 100 times larger and powered by tubes. And the inspiration was an MRI machine that you get fed into and spit out the other side.
Don't put me in here, okay?
Late off.
That's one of the things that we tried to do in 1969 was make things big and cumbersome and funny.
When I get into the design of the weapons, I'm not designing things to be humorous. I have to put myself in Men in Black in 1969 and say, what would it really be like? So none of it's ever for laughs. It just happens to be happens to be funny.
Series 4, deatomizer.
That's what I'm talking about.
Noisy cricket.
So we'd go back to Men in Black 1 and 2, and basically any weapon that was there now had to be designed for 2012 and for 1969. So that's the design challenge.
We made some really beautiful, very powerful weapons for 2012 that are very sleek and great next generation guns. And then we made some based on tube technology weapons that are the standard issue for Men in Black in 1969. And they're very funny. I mean, it looks like a tube TV combined with a gun.
Men in Black cars always been kind of cool. In 1969, it's a Ford Galaxy, which is not only an iconographic look, but anything called the Galaxy seems like it belongs in our movie.
It's a beautiful car, and we went with the two-door version because it's more beautiful than the four-door. Its tail, everything about it evokes space travel.
He has a trunk device in his car, similar to the first Men in Black, where he can press a button and his arsenal of weapons comes up.
That's what I'm talking about.
And his car also has a mechanism in it that raises and allows monobikes to be dispensed from underneath it.
You have these in the future? No.
Monocycles are single-wheeled vehicles with a seat in the center.
We fabricated a really cool gyroscopic one-wheeled vehicle.
These creations that Doug Harlocker came up with are so beautiful. I mean, they're like art pieces that these guys ride.
You okay, Will?
What was shocking is that Bo showed us this early photograph of a motorcycle.
There actually have been motorcycles designed and manufactured back in almost the turn of the century, but all of them are plagued by practical problems.
Be better with 4 wheels. 2 is like my minimum.
They don't really work that well. So the Men in Black designed this motorcycle. It's great, it's very agile. It can go through narrow spaces. And like everything else in their world, you know, they have unlimited resources, so when they make a motorcycle, it's gonna be beautiful, and you'll want one.
Bo's fantastic. We have a lot of fun together, and he designs great sets, great vehicles. Everything he does is brilliant.
I love this franchise because of the underlying concept. It's a springboard for my imagination.
Bo Welch has been able to over and over and over again create that, you know, quintessential Men in Black look and feeling. And I'm just happy to be on his team.
Who wants to go in? Remember your race first.
I promise you the secrets of the universe, nothing more.
Cut. Good, let's play it back.
We're here to help Barry tell the story the way he wants to tell it.
For me, the best visual effects are the ones where you didn't even know there were visual effects. You can change the colors of the styrofoam from white to black.
We want things to be as seamless as possible within this crazy, cartoonish world.
Now give me back my head.
It's basically, you know, expecting the unexpected and planning for everything.
So glad this isn't one of the times we explode.
Attention. Early warning system engaged. Inbound hostile warships entering solar system. Catastrophic Earth attack imminent.
Men in Black always has this strange world that they live in. In a lot of this movie, it was maybe less of the aliens and more sort of environments and dramatic situations that we created. It was a little different than the other film, but still, there are aliens and crazy, bizarre creatures running around.
Ooh, man, you look like you come from the planet Damn.
One of the things for this movie is there's always a level of whimsical realism, so to speak. It's not always quite real. Sometimes it's surreal.
Which is the hard part. When it's so absurd, everything you're looking at is so ridiculous, but it still has to feel like it's real.
Okay, come on, I got larvae to feed.
My hope is when you see the movie, you think we're watching a documentary. So I hope that there's never a sense of where a visual effects shot is or where a live action shot is. I think it's got to be unified.
Who are you?
Exactly.
There's multiple instances of that throughout this entire movie where we do these, you know, kind of what I'll call invisible sleight of hand type of shots.
Those are invisible things that no one would ever know, and we don't want them to know, but that's going back to the variety of the show. There's just little pieces everywhere in every shot almost.
The opening of the movie takes place in some high-security prison. And they built part of the set on stages in New York City, but the spaces that they had were a little bit on the smaller side, certainly smaller than the stages that we're used to here in Los Angeles.
The interior of the prison is a big mix of set pieces designed by Bo Welch, the production designer. And a lot of the work we did inside there was extending hallways and making the prisons much taller to make this thing feel gigantic.
And then we populated, some of the cells with, a few arms that you would see, holding cell bars and stuff. Some guards as well on all the other floors were added digitally.
Boris the animal.
It's just Boris.
And then Boris was one of the characters where, Rick Baker did a great job in trying to figure out exactly what he should look practically. And then for us, it was more a matter of augmentation.
Ken Ralston and I go way back. We've known each other since we were teenagers, and we were influenced by the same stuff, and we speak the same language. So I was very excited that Ken was going to do this film. And I really thought, now we can really do a really nice marriage of our techniques.
We really work closely together on what we can do to combine what he does and what I do. So the makeups take us like 80% of the way sometimes, and we'll finish them off with a little bit of CG work. Other times with Boris, he'll become a lot more just pure computer graphic work when he comes unglued and turns into more of the alien character. It's very cool. But Rick really was integral in designing what that would be too.
Barry always wanted to have this reveal of what he'll turn into as type of a monster. And Rick Baker had actually built a bunch of maquettes as to what Boris might transform into. We use that as total inspiration for us.
I always saw him as an ever-changing movie where these fingers appear and do things.
That's not possible!
That was a prosthetic that was just sculpted in the closed position in Rick Baker's prosthetic.
The fingers on the eyes, when he's pissed off, they come out. Rick's original concept was that the makeup would be a starting point, and then for it to be taken over by digital.
It's just Boris!
And so we would replace that portion of his face and actually animate those fingers moving and blend it in with the rest of the actor's face.
Boris's weapon/friend is revealed in the form of the weasel. And that's another interesting kind of mix of Rick Baker's work, designing the hand and also designing the look of the weasel.
I did a design that had this very fingery kind of thing that was on his arm that looked like it could be something that was jewelry, but then I thought you could use that, throw that thing on people and it would attack them and stuff.
That was a really fun creature to animate and a fun idea of just what is their connection, because it's a part of him, but it's clearly a separate creature also.
Good boy.
I always thought of it as it's an extension of him, and it can go out on its own, and it has its own little brain because it's clearly thinking about what it's doing.
There is a shot in the movie where we see the weasel kind of enter Boris's hand. And we're like, okay, is that gonna work? And, the makeup that they had was sort of like these little claw fingers that were supposed to open up. Of course, they didn't build that, practically. They just had, a little bit of makeup job. We replaced that entire hand digitally so that we can open up the palm, sort of like, its little sleeping bed, and then allow the fingers to close.
So this thing is, who knows what the hell it is, but it's a cool creature, and it has a very strange bond with him.
You complete me.
In the headquarters, there's probably more digital shots than you think. In the set itself, there's ceiling replacement, there's all of the glass in the big office of O's and a lot of other places in the movie is all digital because it was impossible to make glass that big.
And getting the aliens in there, a lot of Rick's practical aliens in suits and headpieces and whatnot, but we also shot some blue screen pieces later, and there are a few digital aliens in there as well. There's a couple aliens in the background, and there's some little flying saucers that are there, and the worm guys make a comeback to the headquarters, and what we call the orb, and the little orb workstation, where the agents are interacting, where different imagery shows up on this three-dimensional thing, which really looks fantastic in stereos, and so it's a wide variety in the headquarters.
What is that supposed to be?
Barry was looking for a specific look in the busts, which was, it's a kind of material that maybe we'd never seen. It was kind of a plastic or an anthracite or something that's really hard to achieve on set.
So basically, every time you see them, they're all digital. No matter what the shot is, they're all digital. In fact, there are shots of Tommy where we're coming over the crowd and when he's doing his speech about Zed, it's all changed. Not just the heads, we've replaced the back wall, the floor. Everything is
digital except him and the podium that he's at.
Thank you.
There are things that they've shot on partial sets and the actors against a green or a blue screen, and they're put into sets at a later date.
Missing something?
The game.
There's the scene with Griffin at Shea Stadium where it reveals the baseball game and all of that. Almost all of that scene is digital except for the actors. There was a tiny, tiny set piece there that we shot on blue screen with the guys.
Part of the challenge has been we had to recreate Shea Stadium, which Shea Stadium no longer exists. So that's been, it's always fun to do kind of a period piece. So you're digging up a lot of photographs and what have you, trying to find something that's true to 1969 and what it looks like.
Barry really wanted to keep that as real as possible, as far as, you know, the floors and maybe even the color of the seats. And it got to the point where actually Major League Baseball got involved on a certain level to make sure that things were as accurate as they should be.
It's my favorite moment in human history.
And we also needed to create the baseball game and 20,000 people in the stands with completely digital crowds and completely digital baseball players.
Some of the more challenging shots that we had to do in Men in Black is where we transition from a live-action actor to a CG version.
We have a lot of characters and stunts that are digital doubles.
You gotta go! Go, go, go!
The time jump is a major effects scene in the film, and we shot a lot of blue screen material of Will on different flying rigs that were used.
He is towards the end of the shot. It just goes dead center.
Don't cross camera with my hands.
Right.
No, no!
There's one moment that's a great combination of a digital character and Will Smith's real face.
Shock, desperation, anger.
Barry shot just Will from about the chest up, like acting like he's reaching and doing all of this and getting all this expression on his face. And then we use that to put onto our digital character. You know, it's just part of the fun of the sequence.
There's a nice narrative theme in the film about convergence. And, you know, I don't want to get all sentimental about it, but if you think about all of the pieces that go into making a movie, it actually is kind of a miracle that it even gets done at all. The process of making this film was difficult, but it sure was worth it.
We're really happy with the movie. I mean, we couldn't be happier.
The prison break at the beginning of the movie is a really important scene for a number of reasons. One is that it sets up the threat of our big villain, Boris the Animal.
Well, well, Boris the Animal has a visitor.
You know, when you open up into it, you don't know where you are except that you're in some sort of prison. And so as the sequence builds, it kind of becomes bigger and bigger. You realize these are really long hallways and there's more room to make this thing feel gigantic.
The set piece that they built was 2 sections tall, but needed to be 6, so we had to do a lot of set extensions work. And then also for the length of it, really only went just a couple cells, so we would have to extend that digitally as well.
My character in the movie is coming to help Boris escape, and I do that bringing in a cake. Just an innocent little homemade baked cake.
Would you mind cutting this up for us? It's a special day.
We got to make it out of a springed silicone unit that was then glazed with real cake frosting and decorated, so it sort of jiggled a little bit.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
Why is that?
It'll ruin your figure.
Hidden inside the cake is this alien. It's called the Weasel.
What was fun about that sequence is it's such a bizarre creature and what it's doing. Spencer Cook, our animation director, had a lot of fun with how we designed that creature and what we were doing with it. And there's a series of shots through the movie where it's played in a bizarre way a little bit for laughs. Like when he rubs almost like a cap on Boris's face.
Even down to the detail of the little highlight in the weasel's eye, just to give him a little personality. I mean, there's a moment where Spencer kind of animated the weasel looking right up and making contact with Boris.
It's thinking about what it's doing, but it's looking to him for approval. I don't know like how it fits into his biology, and who knows what it is, but it's a cool creature.
Rick Baker designed the weasel. He actually delivered a digital file for the digital guys to build their character from. We also had a practical one, that we had on set, so that would help those match up.
The Lunar Prison was really fun for us too because we got to design and make all the weapons. So we made assault rifles and submachine guns and handguns. There's really a lot of eye candy in this movie.
I'm so excited because earlier I got to see my rocket launcher. I've been waiting to hold that thing for weeks. It's pretty intense. It all starts out with Betty Crocker, then cut to me with the rocket launcher.
The other aspect of the prison break sequence, which was a fun challenge and allowed us in animation to use some different tools, was the scene when Boris shoots the hole in the wall. And the original idea for that was to do it with stunts, but it just didn't look right. So what we started thinking about was we could animate all these guys. And so we sort of sculpted the forces to have them fall through that hole.
They put me on this harness and they have to repel me backwards at like 50 miles an hour.
Go!
Doing all my own stunts. But I think they do have a stunt girl to do like the extra intense stuff.
The other big aspect of that sequence was Boris escaping. It's one long shot. The real actor, Jermaine Clement, he becomes a digital character, and it's on the moon, low gravity, so it's much more floaty and much more smooth, which is what we try to avoid in digital animation. We don't want it floaty and smooth.
Let's rewrite history, shall we, Kay?
The problem is on the stage in New York, they could only pull the camera back like 30 feet or so. The camera move in the actual shot, though, travels from the moon surface until we hit the planet Earth. So we had to take Jermaine, kind of come up with the digital equivalent in the computer of his representation, exactly what the physical camera had done, and then extend that off digitally.
It's really a cool, exciting, but very Men in Black way to start the movie. Barry has very unique beginnings to his films, and this is definitely one of them.
The scene in Wu's Diamond Garden is the first big action scene for Agent J and Agent K. And it's really kind of a welcome back to the franchise.
Oh, Kay, Jay, so happy to see you.
Wu's restaurant is filled with a lot of different effects, a lot of practical stuff that the guys did and mixed with what we're doing. And it actually turned out pretty fun.
What's in that slime, actually?
KY jelly mixed with water.
On this one, the idea was that all the aliens would come from Rick and Cinovation, even if they're going to be digital characters, that he would be involved with the design just for a consistency in the overall look.
Hey!
We did some aliens specifically for that scene, and we also have the Spiky Balba, which is this little animatronic character that we did that is one of Boris's favorite foods.
There's a beautiful sculpt and all this detailed paintwork, but you need to have it feel more alive and actually give it a personality. So we had a company do some blinks and move the stocks around a little bit and add little eye glances and breathing.
Foodstuffs.
Tommy's character finds the Spiky Balba and then proceeds to beat Mr. Wu savagely with it.
Who's the Spiky Ball before Wu? All right, slug.
Whoa, whoa! The audio track on it with little squeaks and whines gives it a whole other personality.
Also, Wu is revealed as an alien for just one shot, like he's a slug of some sort. That was all CG. Basically, we had the actor standing there with these blue leotards on.
Kay, come on, I got larvae to feed.
We had a number of other aliens that we called pass aliens. They used a couple of UFC fighters that we did alien makeups on in some shots. And there was one very elaborate one that we called Dread that you see for a split second. We always knew that they were going to just be a glimpse of this guy. As soon as you see him, he gets shot, basically.
When we get into the gun battle between Agent J and K and the aliens, we had to come up with a look for each alien to have a slightly different color of splatter. You wanted to feel like it came from the real world. Also felt a little bit like the first Men in Black films, but also now I was like, well, let's do something a little different this time.
Fish is going to eat you, and it's coming up your legs. You grab, and we'll rehearse all this.
The giant fish in the tank, it's such a big creature that when it comes flying out of the door, there was no way to do much practical there.
All of the design and execution happened in the post process. You got to figure out, well, how does this fish look? you know? And how does it look appropriate in the environment in which it's going to be seen in? I had to make sure that the color palette and skin characteristics looked good in that environment. So that required multiple iterations as well.
And then we had the guys on cables, and trying to make all of that even believable was not easy in any way.
And 3, 2, 1, go!
This is a very early test of like how stuff sprays off the fish, kind of how it hits the floor, and how slime would work. And then kind of refining that a little farther. CG doors, CG furniture, fish is obviously CG. Final composite, you know, getting all those pieces together, all the plates kind of put together to make a single plate.
Especially in a visual effects movie like this.
And now,
where we're incorporating creatures into a real environment. No matter how fantastic the creature, we want to find something in the real world that is a kind of counterpart, something that we can get ideas from in terms of how a creature that big and that heavy could move. We incorporate that into the animation.
For some of the shots where Will does actually physically interact a little bit closer with the fish, when it came back here, there was a lot of paint work for us to kind of make sure that, you know, our digital character and Will Smith all integrated together.
Just a constant mix of types of techniques to make the whole scene work.
The time jump sequence was always going to be one of the most challenging sequences in the movie.
We did a combination of just about everything you could imagine.
This was the weirdest sequence I'd ever worked on.
Now, take these, because it gets pretty windy on the way down. The way down?
And when you sort of read the script and you just have this little description, it's like, you know, Will activates time device, jumps off the Chrysler building, next thing you know, he's in 1969. You're like, all right, well, you know, exactly what are the breakdown aspects of that?
Gosh, it was one of the earliest sequences planned out in the movie, and it was some early pre-visualization was done, which is kind of early models and early animation tests.
And then during production, the only thing that really existed was one of the gargoyles on the corner of the Chrysler building that Will is walking on.
Basically, we had one gargoyle head, a little piece of some of the back wall of the Chrysler building, but that really was it. It was a big blue screen stage. And everything else, the Chrysler building, all of New York, or our version of New York, is all manufactured by us.
And it's one of those things where, again, we start off with the reality, we'll build the Chrysler exactly as is, but then we have to alter it to either work with the set piece, or it might be for the storytelling purposes.
The Chrysler building is really, I think, you know, 80-odd stories in real life. In the sequence, it goes anywhere from 80 stories to 300, maybe 400 stories to, again, to fit the narrative, to fit the needs of the sequence. Because I think if you really jumped off of it, it would take just a few seconds to get to the bottom, and that's maybe not very satisfying as a roller coaster ride in the movie.
Now, as soon as you're moving fast enough, that circle's gonna fill up with some sort of green time travel liquid or some such, and it's gonna glow really bright.
We really wanted to feel that the clock is ticking, and he's got to achieve a certain number of steps with the time device to actually go back in time, and he's got to do that before he hits the ground. So one of the cool shots that I'm most proud of is this shot where he loses the time device. It gets knocked out of his hand, and he's tumbling around.
That's just an all digital Will. There was no other way to do it, to get him to start to peel out and go down the side of the Chrysler building.
As the camera goes past him, we see his face, and he's reaching for this device. Everything from his chin down is a digital character. But his face is Will's real face, because Barry shot him against a blue screen from about the chest up, acting like he's reaching and getting all this expression on his face. And then we use that to put onto our digital character for just that portion of the shot.
But there's also where we replace a hand holding a time device. The time device is CG. Parts of Will are CG, and some of it's real. It's constant mix. The time device finally clicks in and works. This, whatever it is, this green thing comes in and wipes across, and you're suddenly in different time zones, and you're going through time.
What I wrote for that scene was that Agent J would travel back into time and see every type of person, every type of creature who has ever lived on the island of Manhattan. So we get to not only see the dinosaurs, but we also travel through a fun montage of history.
We have the Wall Street crash briefly, and Barry Sonnenfeld is the main guy who's falling in that scene. That was pretty funny. And it's just nuts. I mean, the whole sequence is nuts, which is actually what's so cool about it.
I think it also lends kind of a historic scope to the movie that we're telling, which is also a story about saving the Earth again. It's a secret history that the world may never know about, but that the Men in Black do.
And action.
The monobike is a specialty prop.
That's fantastic.
They're great toys. They go fast, they handle really well, and it's like being a kid again on that stuff.
There might be!
There might be!
Yeah!
I treat these kinds of vehicles like characters, especially in a movie like this.
It's a roller coaster we're making, and you gotta break rules constantly to make it work.
We gotta stop this guy! I've been trying. You haven't been trying?
Oh dear, I forgot to see this one coming.
There's a moment where Boris jumps with his alien motorcycle out of Shea Stadium, lands on their car gets damaged, bursts into flames. So this is when they dispense the monobikes.
You have these in the future? No. Get on.
The car was actually a practical thing that lifted it up, but we really had to tweak it a lot. We had to paint out a lot of cables, as usual. And then the device that lowers the bikes out was all CG and digital that we put in. They get on these things, and then we're off on this motorcycle chase.
Keep driver settings to 0 gain. Balance pitching yaw with short bursts on the center stalk between 80 and 100 PSI.
Yeah, I didn't understand any of that.
The idea behind the motorcycle chase was to not just give us a cool, kind of Men in Black take on a car chase, but also to give it that Men in Black spin, which was some different technology.
They've got these really fancy, somehow super high-tech motorcycle vehicles back in 1969. These are all, super high chrome and look very high-tech, sort of like your typical Men in Black type of equipment that you might get.
And of course, there is no such thing as a motorcycle. It just isn't really a drivable piece of equipment. So here we have these, things that don't even exist and aren't drivable and have to do a chase sequence in 1969 through the streets of New York at night. How do you do that?
Right there, Chief. Hell yeah. Be better with 4 wheels. 2 is like my minimum.
What we did is we set out to make the real thing. We made a real tire, real looking engine, seats. Actors can mount it. We can put it on a track and run it in and out of frame as though it's taking off.
Try to pull him out a little faster, guy.
And then they also built a version. It was on like a go-kart, because obviously you can't really ride a motorcycle that effectively.
They're go-karts with Porsche engines, so they'll actually go very, very fast.
There will always be a CG element to it in that making the wheel move and when it has to careen down the street. But ultimately, the visual effects department will lay in the tire and erase the go-kart.
There was a huge amount of blue and green screen work with the actors just sitting on the stage on a thing that would move, and they were pretending to ride.
That's cut.
The fun thing about that was that Agent J and Agent K both have a different amount of experience on the motorcycles. This is in 1969. This is, Agent K's world. So he knows how to ride these things. Agent J has never seen these before. So we took that into account in the animation, and a huge portion of that sequence is animated.
A lot of that is all CG. Even the stunts and the actors are all CG, racing around each other. And we're going down a CG street with CG cars and CG guys spinning around. It's just a constant mix of types of techniques to make the whole scene work.
You gotta remember, this is new to me. You know that's just a blue screen, right? Yeah.
One of the great joys in the life of a writer is to see what you've written actually come to life and get made. And the motorcycles was no exception.
Everybody's going to want motorcycles after this chase.
Have everyone's attention, please. Okay, you know your kid won the goldfish in that little baggie from the school fair, and you didn't want that nasty thing in your house, so you flush it down the toilet? Well, this what happens.
Making this movie required us to be fast and flexible.
We were in there juggling as fast as we could just to get the plate work shots.
There were a lot of ideas flowing throughout the production, and we wanted to do as many as we could.
I promise you the secrets of the universe, nothing more.
So there's some secrets out there that the universe don't know about?
We had to be able to jump into a new scenario and a new idea without having set up a lot of technology that would have locked us into a certain approach.
There is no K. He's been dead for over 40 years.
What?
The big challenge on the film was the huge range of work on it. It's not 400 shots of the same character over and over again.
You're gonna send me back to 1969.
The time jump, the entire scene is very stylized, surreal. The only thing on set was one of the gargoyles and a piece of the Chrysler building.
There's a big mix of live action and CG with, again, a kind of a Sonnenfeld surreality of speed and angle.
You know, it's supposed to be 1969 when all this is happening.
Okay.
How do you know my name?
And one of the ways to make it feel like you're in the 60s are period cars and people in period costumes.
I'm gonna need my gun.
No. Space gun.
It's a lot of different kind of work. It's not one character throughout a movie or one trick throughout a film that just is repeated over and over and over.
Whoa! You know, I don't have no problem pimp slapping the shiznit out of Andy Warhol.
What?
It keeps all the artists involved and intrigued.
Lots of demands and lots of different kinds of shots.
The devices look like something from 2030.
But because we're able to create these things digitally, you're able to get away with it.
The director wanted to make sure that no matter how crazy or cartoony the effects were, that they felt real in the movie.
All right.
And that's what makes it interesting.
Hey man, how old are you?
29.
Oof. You got some city miles on you.
For the creation of what we called the Weasel, the creature that lives in Boris the animal, ImageWorks artists drew from multiple sources for the starting points on what would become a fully digital creature. Starting with Rick Baker's initial design and physical prop, we took multiple photographs on set and in various lighting scenarios in order to recreate all the details and nuances needed to integrate the Weasel into the live-action plate. ImageWorks artists then created a fully articulate model, painted detailed textures, and wrote subtle shaders to create specularity, translucency, and wetness. The Weasel's defense mechanism was what we termed the quill, a bullet-like projectile that would be embedded into its victims. This quill would be seen both from a distance and in extreme close-up, so details such as fibers, cracks, and wrinkles had to be created. Once the Weasel model was built, ImageWorks animators, led by animation director Spencer Cook, took the Weasel and tested various kinds of movements and expressions and speed tests for the quill. As testing matured, we realized the Weasel developed a personality, and director Barry Sonnenfeld embraced the idea of infusing the Weasel with subtle emotion and connection to Boris. Subtle eye movements, breathing, and anticipation give the Weasel a detailed sense of being real. Integrating the Weasel into the live-action plates required detailed match moves, addition of digital metal ankle cuffs, cloth interaction, and matching of on-set prop pieces seen in other shots. ImageWorks artists added the arm restraint, metal filing effects, and interactive reflection from metal to Weasel and Weasel to metal using HDR lighting techniques. The Weasel lives inside Boris's hand, and to make this work, we started with a 3D scan of Rick Baker-designed prosthetic hand and used that as a basis to completely recreate and animate the hand digitally. We created subtle skin shading and sheen, and then animators added claw details and even a subtle glance from the Weasel to Boris. We wanted to walk a fine line between cuddly and creepy, so paying attention to many small details like eye glints, breathing, and wetness added to the realism and feeling of uneasiness.
You complete me.
The alien fish character in Men in Black 3 was always intended to be a comedic character, but at the same time, we also needed it to be a monster. The early design phases of this creature were exploring different ideas about how monstrous to make it or how comedic to make it. Some were more funny than others, and some had a more dangerous quality to them. In the early animation tests, we were exploring how this thing could move. What kind of behavior would it have when it's out of the water? One of the things that we do is we'll frequently look to nature, especially when we're dealing with fantasy creatures like this. We want to ground it in a reality. So we looked at a lot of footage of sea elephants and walruses, which were a bit more blubbery, and we needed it to be a much stronger, more powerful, muscled creature. But this was a good place to start, and we got a lot of good ideas from nature. We took single frames from the sequence and posed the character in specific poses. And you could see right away that the jaw of the character didn't seem strong enough to support the action, especially when it's trying to swallow a full-size man. I started looking for other kinds of reference that might help us. I came across a prehistoric fish called a Dunkleosteus that had a much stronger, more powerful jaw. And so we used that as a basis for modeling the face of the alien fish. This shot starts, like practically every shot that we do, with previs. Will Smith walks into the kitchen, Will Smith gets thrown out of the kitchen, then we see the alien fish come right into camera. They shot the basic elements, Will Smith walking into the kitchen, then as a completely separate setup, a stuntman getting pulled out of the kitchen, and that was basically the shot. At ImageWorks, we put these two pieces of film together, and we started blocking out the animation of the fish. Very rough form, just to get the basic idea of where the fish should be at what time. Effects animation then would use that to run a simulation pass for the tables and chairs that the fish is knocking over. We continued to refine the animation, the whiskers moving, the skin jiggling, the weight of the creature, adding more detail to it to bring it to life. The effects animation department would then take our animation and add a slime pass on top of it. In the end, many talented ImageWorks artists and technicians worked together to bring the alien fish to life.
The time jump, the entire scene is very stylized, surreal. Basically, the only thing on set was a very small partial piece of one of the gargoyles and a piece of the wall or two on the Chrysler building. Everything else is covered in blue screen material.
Yeah, because there was limited space on the stage, you could only pull the crane back so far. And so the rest of the move was matched up to the live action and then pulled up to the very top of the Chrysler building.
Every single thing in it is all basically digital. The entire New York cityscape, the rivers, the spaceships coming in.
And we're actually transitioning from live action elements of Will into digital versions of Will. There's digital cloth, there's sometimes hands are CG, the time device is CG, there are trees lining the streets. And if you're looking really closely, the light in the city is very sculpted as well. So Barry wanted to get in there and have certain avenues with light coming down it, other avenues don't, and so if you really want to analyze it, it's completely fantasy lighting, except when you look at it, it feels real.
What happens if Boris gets the arc now? Rock with that invasion, total destruction of Earth!
The motorcycle chase through the streets of Queens, New York was a very complex mix of live action, blue screen, and digital set pieces. Background plates were shot at night and then stabilized and match moved. Additionally, highly detailed rotoscope of cars, signs, and street pieces was done in order to allow tight integration of our digital motorcycles into the live action plates. Accurate digital models of the motorcycles in Agent J and Agent K were created from scans and photographic reference. Boris, Griffin, and Boris's motorcycle were also created. ImageWorks artists created exact replicas of the hardware, costumes, cloth, and hair simulations per shot. We added CG period cars and destruction effects for particular shots that would otherwise have been hard to time practically. Many shots in the sequence required mixing and matching of CG and live-action elements, sometimes keeping just the blue screen foreground element and adding the CG motorcycle wheel against a live-action plate. For a stunt involving Agent J riding up over the top of a car, the plate was first match-moved. Then, rotoscoped mats of cars in the street were created. ImageWorks animators then animated the digital versions of Agent J and his motorcycle, pushing physics and having fun with the Men in Black world. When the director wanted a bigger impact on the car, we decided to go completely digital with that car. This allowed us to achieve a higher level of perilous excitement, creating water spray, glass breaking, and sparks from the bumper added to the action and realism. As the chase sequence matured in editorial, different background plates were experimented with and chosen to help tie certain actions together. We created fully digital models of Boris, Griffin, and then the two of them together on Boris's motorcycle, once again completely matching the live-action shots. Cloth simulations, light interaction, and water sprays were created and integrated. An elaborate vehicle crash and pileup was designed and shot, but later in editorial, the filmmakers wanted to have a couple more angles on the action that didn't get originally filmed. ImageWorks artists then had to recreate 3 city blocks, the crash, and all the accompanying effects completely digitally, matching location, lighting, and action. Detailed surveys and HDR photographs were taken of the location during our nights of filming. This reference was used as the basis for the digital build. Artists then skillfully built, textured, and lit all the hundreds of pieces that went into creating 3 complete blocks of Queens, New York. Puddled water, light flares, period cars, and lots of wear and tear on the streets and buildings were all combined to create the photoreal environment. For the actual semi-trailer truck crash, animators combined keyframe animation and simulation to achieve the dynamic interaction between the truck, box truck, bus, and street. ImageWorks effects artists then created water sprays, tire smoke, sparks, and other debris, along with detailed lighting to seamlessly blend back and forth between live action and purely digital shots. When we needed more aggressive action out of a certain blue screen element, we decided that it would give us more control and expression to recreate that element completely digitally. We redressed our digital Queen streets and added new backlights. Keyframe animation for the main characters and motorcycle were then enhanced with dynamic cloth simulation, destruction effects, and water spray simulations to accurately allow the cutting back and forth between live action and CG. Ultimately, the motorcycle sequence utilized a dizzying array and combination of techniques: live-action backgrounds, fully digital backgrounds, CG characters combined with on-set photography, CG vehicles with live-action characters, and a diverse range of effects. ImageWorks artists used cutting-edge techniques in lighting and simulation to seamlessly create the chase across entire city blocks, all the while keeping the audience in the heart of the action. For the recreation of the Apollo 11 lunar mission, as it existed in July of 1969, artists at Sony Pictures ImageWorks had to do a faithful recreation of the entire area around Launch Complex 39A, as well as the viewing platform, and all the way through the actual liftoff into outer space. To achieve this, we had a small set piece of the gantry, one of the gantry arms, as well as the uppermost part of the capsule on a soundstage in New York. Around that was a big blue screen that required a lot of set extensions and matte paintings. In addition, the shots where we're viewing the rocket in the distance, from the viewing area of the launch complex, was actually shot on a beach down in Long Island, New York. The only thing that was in that plate was the foreground bleachers, as well as the flagpoles and the flags of all the nations. Added digitally were CG crowds, the marshlands off in the distance, the rocket, the gantry, as well as the sky. We also lowered the flags so that we could reveal the rocket and gantry off in the distance. This required extensive rotoscoping and complex paintwork to achieve this effect. To create the surrounding environment, we took a trip to Kennedy Space Center, formerly known as Cape Canaveral, and with the assistance of NASA, ascended to the top of the actual launch tower and photographed dozens of high-resolution and high dynamic range images and tiles to be used later as matte painting elements and textures on actual geometry, essentially creating a 360-degree cyclorama. ImageWorks artists then created moving waves, added reflection to the water, and removed any modern buildings and machinery that wasn't there in 1969. Other complexities these shots involved are transitions of our digital characters within one shot from live action to CG or CG to live action. We also were intercutting between shots of live action and CG for our digital characters, as well as our environments, some of the pieces which are practical on set and some of which were digital assets. We had to be faithful to the behavior of the light, the behavior of the clothing, as well as all the material properties. For the recreation of the liftoff of the Apollo 11 rocket, we wound up studying a vast amount of footage of the actual event provided to us by NASA. This included features such as ice that was building up along the rocket itself and flaking off, all the steam and smoke events, any of the liquid oxygen runoff, as well as the big fire and all of the diverting smoke that was coming off the base of the rocket. To achieve this effect, we wound up using big fluid simulations, both on a very small scale for detailed work, as well as very large scale to handle the big volumes needed. Additionally, we needed to get all the appropriate illumination, the fire illuminating from the rocket smoke, as well as the rocket itself and the gantry. To create these large-scale volume effects, we wound up rendering everything using Arnold, which is our ray tracer, to get the appropriate lighting and illumination levels. Also, integrating it all together allowed us to marry and blend all of these elements in one render pass. We still had the ability, though, to render out these passes separately and adjust them appropriately in the composite. The director sometimes would ask for certain characteristics and behaviors, and though the baseline here at ImageWorks is to ground ourselves in reality first, we were able to collaborate, explore, and achieve the technical and creative demands of the film.